Hello.
Hi, Simon. How are you today?
Good, thanks. How are you? Sorry
I-
I'm late. Everything just got away from me.
no problem. You are a very busy, popular man, and I'm happy to have the time to talk to you
Thank
today.
you. Thank you.
You know what? First of all, I want to thank you for making this movie because I got to tell you, we're about the same age. This so brought me back to going to the theater in the 70s and sitting in those theaters, watching movies like Earthquake and The Towering Inferno. And it just brought such a big smile to my face. So when you got the script, was it something that you thought too, like, wow, big action disaster film?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually, the disaster part of it, I didn't really think of so clever because I too, like you, I saw those films and Poseidon Adventure was another
Right.
one at the time, and we all remember the classic shots out of the thing, like the guy falling into the light from the ceiling.
Yes.
And I, and what's weird is that I get to work with a son on this film that did that stunt, in the Poseidon Adventure. So, it's a classic, Hollywood, family story of like so I love that part of it, the history part of this kind of film. And uh but I took it on it. I had to invent a bad guy in it because
Yes.
these films, it can't just be about the building burning everything. So I decided to make it more of a monster movie,
Yeah.
and the volcano is a monster, and that's what's coming to get our heroes. And it's a character, and because there isn't really a human bad guy in the film, there's some people that make some poor choices and and are dreamers and listen to the wrong scientists instead of the right scientists. There's people like that, but in human sense. But in terms of someone that's really bad and it's going to end you, it's the volcano. And so to me, I try to make it a monster movie, even in going down to the point of view of giving it its own sound effects that the audience doesn't necessarily notice what you've done because it's sort of a primeval thing that goes into our human psyche, as that if we use like low animal noises on the volcano, like lions slow down and elephants and things, like we automatically go, that's something to be scared of, even if we don't really know we're hearing it in the subwoofers. And so it's fun to invent things to make the volcano into a character, and also to try and make it imaginative. Like, this thing has to do something different every time it shows up because we
Right.
can't just have the same threat every time. So if it was a sentient animal, it would be trying to outfox you and out get you in a different way, and that's what I did with the volcano.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch it. And how much research did you have to do into volcanoes once you started to take this?
Oh, a lot. I mean, you become a sort of a bit of a temporary, volcanologist, expert. So I watched all the documentaries and all the research on it. So because I have to invent, because in these sort of action scripts, they're very basic in when it comes to action. Like, they get chased by the lava or something, and you can't really make an action sequence out of something like that. So you have to say, okay, what are all the great things volcanoes do? And
Yeah.
so I watch, what are the ones in Hawaii done? What are the ones in Indonesia and New Zealand, whatever? And they all have slightly different characteristics. And you go, okay, well, you can have the slow moving lava, you can have the exploding lava, you can have the lava when it hits water,
Mhm.
releases poisonous gas. You
Wow.
can have the pyroclastic flow, which is a 400 mile an hour, cloud of acid gas, which will roast you in a second. So you go, okay, I've got my arsenal of weapons now. I've got 10 great things volcanoes do in
Right.
not in a bad way, and okay, now I build my action sequences around those. So if my 4 or 5 set pieces, I know I'm going to get the volcano to show what it can do in each one of these. So you do become a bit of an expert, and you don't want to. I don't make stuff up. It's not a fantasy in terms of it's a volcano controlled by Satan that can
Right.
do anything. It's actually still a natural event. So everything is based in scientific fact.
Yeah.
You may be the unluckiest person in the world that you get the volcano that does 5 different things that normally they wouldn't all do at once. But that's a movie. You have to sort of amp it up in some way. But
Yeah.
it's only
Yeah.
just,
Fascinating. you have worked with so many amazing action stars. I mean, going back to even creating Angelina Jolie into an action star, and then you look at the movie like The Mechanic, you know, Jason Statham, and then of course The Expendables. My God, there's not anybody in that movie who probably didn't try to outdo each other. Now you're working with these great Asian actors who are in their own right. Some of them are huge, huge stars. So how did they hold up in terms of the action that you made them do? I mean, my favorite stunt was that Land Rover jumping over that. I just was like gasping watching that stuff. And then the monorail, I mean, working with this cast must have been a lot of fun for you.
It was, and because it was interesting to me because they were such big stars in China. I mean, these are people that, you know, are top of their profession. They are known to everybody in
Yeah.
that world of that cinema. But to the West, they're fresh new talent, and so that was exciting. So I had people that were top of their game, incredibly skilled and great actors, but nobody had seen them in the West, and
Right.
so that was exciting. I mean, there's Jason Isaacs, who obviously is an English actor people do know in the West,
Yeah.
but the Chinese cast were very new and fresh to everybody, and luckily they were all bilingual, bar one. So I could actually direct, you know, and talk to them in Chinese, and it's just wonderful working with actors from a different culture, and they were kind of fascinated about how I operated because I think, you know, I'm very different from a lot of Chinese directors they've worked with, and I'm fascinated about how they're going to respond to my style of directing, and so everyone's very fascinated every day by each other. So
Right.
it keeps the interest going. So we're not just doing the same old thing we do all the time. We're sort of having a really good new life experience of we're all, you know, made a lot of films. They've worked in a lot of films and I've made a lot of films. And so that part we all know. But the fact of the cultures coming together was very different and sort of exciting. Everyone was sort of, you know, excited every day to work with each other.
I'm sure. Well, were they asking you questions about, like, you know, how would Jason do this, or how would, you know, were they more fascinated with the actors that you've worked with and trying to, you know, get out of your brain what they did in action films?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, I mean, they did ask questions. I mean, they're very respectful.
Yeah.
You know, I think much more you get much more respect as a director in China than you do in Hollywood. You know, I think, you know, which is a cultural thing as well. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, you do with a Hollywood actor, especially movie stars. You know, sometimes you can get into quite a, you know, a tussle with them. You know, but like this is what this is what we're doing. This is what I want to do,
Right.
and you have to sort of persuade or explain to them why it's really important for them to do this. You know,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have to do that with the Chinese actors. They're very respectful of the
Yeah.
director, and
Yeah.
so that part is very easy. And but they are fascinated at difference, and I would come up with cultural differences. Like if there's humor in the scene, I would say, I want you to come in and do this very deadpan humor.
Mm.
And they would go, well, what's deadpan humor? And I would have to explain, okay, in the West we have this sort of style of humor where there can be an incredibly emotional or catastrophic event going on, and everybody's very, you know, blank, and we call it deadpan, and, you know,
Right.
there's no expression. And they found that fascinating because confronted with, you know, a wall of molten lava coming at you, they react, you know, how you should, like screaming and shouting, like, oh my God, we got to get out of here. Even
Yeah.
if they're doing funny lines, you know, it's in a very heightened way. And so some of those scenes I would do in English, some in Chinese, and I would change the style of humor and get them to do it. When they did it in English, they would do it deadpan, and when they do it in Chinese, they would
Yeah.
do it Chinese style. And then in the editing, I would choose which one to use, and often I would use the Chinese one because it was more fun, you know,
Right.
and also, you know, they were, you know, in their comfort zone with it, so you get a better performance.
Absolutely.
So I had the choice of sometimes of scenes that would be in English or Chinese.
Yeah, and having Jason on board, you know, it's not a huge role, but it's a very important role. And I know that he auditioned for you like many, many years ago, and that didn't come to fruition. So it must have been fun to work with him on this.
Yeah, it was. I mean, when he auditioned for Con Air,
Yeah,
and, you know, he was you know, way too young, and for the bad guy, the Malkovich role,
right.
and, you know, a lot of classic character bad guy actors came in to audition for that because that's what the role is. And he comes in, he's very young, good looking, with piercing blue eyes, it's just that's not a bad guy, So he was never going to get that role. I think he came in for a bit of fun, really. I think I heard that, him tell the story of it, and it was kind of shocked because the cameraman pulled a gun out to use as a prop, and he'd never seen a real gun coming from London, and so he was more, I think, scared of the gun than getting the part. But but over the years, I've tried to get him on several films, but it hasn't worked out. Either it's been scheduling, or he hasn't wanted the role. But I've been after him several times, but luckily I got him on this one.
You did get him on that one. I have to know, was that watch a Timex? Because it just kept ticking and ticking.
I don't know what it was, but it was. We probably got through 20 of them by the time.
I'm sure. I was joking around with you. So coming up next, you have another one called The Legend Hunters. Now, I understand you also shot that in China. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that's very different in some ways. People might because Skyfire was actually shot in Malaysia with an international crew. So we had 17 nationalities on the crew. So the whole production was English based. So that was our common language.
Right.
And it was only the actors were Chinese. And even though it was intended for the Chinese audience, it was actually kind of a Hollywood production for China. Legend Hunters was totally Chinese. I was on my own in the middle of China with a 500-person Chinese crew.
Wow.
And that was a true immersion. So that was quite different. I was sort of, they loved Lara Croft Tomb Raider over there. And they have a series of books, classic books called Mojin, which is very similar world. But it's a husband and wife team who go into tombs, and they have a sort of a comedy sidekick guy who lives with them. And it's very funny, which is not necessarily what you'd expect in Chinese, but it's a very funny dialogue-based kind of tomb raiding world. And so they asked me to do it because of my experience with Lara Croft Tomb Raider. But it was a totally Chinese production. And so that was really fascinating because I shot that in Chinese studios and with Chinese crew and Chinese actors, and there was no English involved in that. So
amazing. So it sounds to me like you're not ready to come back to the States and shoot in the States. Like you've got a whole new thing happening here.
No. I came back. I mean, that's the thing is the first, like Skyfire, I didn't even know was going to be in Chinese when I took it on, because my script was in English.
Right.
And it was only sort of when I got deep involved in it, I found out, well, actually, it's all going to be a mixture of Chinese and English. So that was sort of a dip in a toe in the water, and then Legend Hunter was a complete immersion. But I never intended to be out there that long. So I'm back, and I've been back a while, and so I try to do something different every time. So the next one I'm doing is not Chinese. It's definitely it's European based, and it's a period drama, high seas action adventure. So cool. Very different. Yeah.
Good. Looking forward to that. Well, again, always a pleasure for me to talk to you. Thank you for all the great films you've brought our way. I have to tell you, I'm just such a big fan of yours. And this one, I just had so much fun. So thank you so much for your time today, Simon, and stay healthy, stay safe, and best of luck to you.
You too. Thanks, Bonnie. It's great talking to you.
Yeah, great talking to you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.